Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. Today, we're covering a topic that is still controversial, probably will remain controversial for a little bit of time, I would think, but something that in Fertility Confidence Method and with my clients, I'm incredibly passionate about continuing to speak up on because it's controversial and because we're not having these conversations. So, if you're curious, stick around. But before we get into that, a quick thank you to our amazing podcast sponsor, Needed. They are creating amazing supplement systems to cover women's nutritional needs through the preconception phase, through fertility, through pregnancy, and postpartum. And what I love about Needed is they are going above and beyond their third-party testing to ensure that all of their products are exactly what they say they are. And this is a hot topic item we are discussing with our clients and with our programs, is making sure we are using reputable supplement companies, which is why I'm so excited to partner with Needed. They're offering all of our podcast listeners 20% off their first purchase with the code Dr. Kelsey, and you can check them out at thisisneeded.com. So thank you, Needed. The other piece of housekeeping I want to just pop in here and chat quickly about before we roll into our, I feel like I'm probably overselling this controversial topic, but before we roll into our episode, is that next week on Monday, so 7 days from today, when we're recording this on Monday, is the start of our Fertility Confidence Bootcamp. Our spring, technically, although it's going to be June, so I guess that's kind of summer, but our spring bootcamp, it is completely free. It's 5 days of some amazing educational content, but it's not just a come and learn session. We are giving you action items and we are helping you build out the next phase of your fertility care plan with me, with some of my team members, with an amazing community. It is a wonderful, fabulous experience. I highly recommend it. And you can come and join us over at ttc.kelseyduncan/bootcamp. We start next Monday. We go for 5 days and you have the chance of winning over $4,500 worth of prizes. And one of those prizes actually being a full ride scholarship to come and work with me inside Fertility Confidence Method. So you can check that out at ttc.kelseyduncan.com/bootcamp. Okay. What is our controversial topic? Well, my friends, it is asthma. And what you're probably over there saying, but Kelsey, what the heck does asthma have to do with fertility? And that's what makes this controversial, is it actually is something that I think we're going to start to see more research on, and something that is really starting to open the doors to understand more around how the immune system has a play here in terms of your ability to get pregnant and, of course, stay pregnant. So there was a research paper that came across my desk sometime last year that all of a sudden made my brain go, oh my goodness, there is this entire aspect that we haven't even been screening for. I don't ask clients if they have asthma, but what an easy question to ask and uncover this potential roadblock. And it wasn't until we had a client last year who was having recurrent miscarriage. And I was like, listen, I think we really need to do the full gamut of testing at this point. She was getting pregnant, but had had like 4 or 5 losses at that point. And her clinic had run a couple of things, but basically was just saying it's time to do IVF. And her brain was saying, how is IVF going to fix the problem? I'm getting pregnant. I'm not staying pregnant. And that's how she ended up working with me. And so I gave her a laundry list of lab work that we went and ran. And one of the things that came up was an allergic marker that we will talk more about in this episode. And I asked her, I said, do you have allergies? And she said, yeah, in the spring and fall, I get pretty bad seasonal allergies, but I also have asthma. And I was like, huh, interesting. And I started doing some research, and this is how I figured out this connection between asthma, the immune system, and fertility that made me think, I wonder if this is a piece of the puzzle. Is it the whole puzzle? Maybe not, because we know that, the fertility journey, and especially with recurrent loss, it can be complex. It can be multifaceted, but if we can even just start to pick away at finding some root causes, we then know where to go from here. So we did a little bit more digging, and we talked a lot about like what are her triggers and yada yada. And she ended up doing IVF with the clinic. She felt ready for that step, which we supported her on. But one of the stipulations from her was she wanted some extensive immune support with her transfer. And her clinic was a little bit weary, but we sent her over some research. We sent her over the asthma data that we have, which isn't a lot. And we sent her over some other immune type data. And they agreed, given her history of recurrent miscarriage when trying in unmedicated cycles, they were willing to kind of skip some steps, right? These were things they don't normally do with first-time transfers, but they were willing to skip some steps, and her first transfer was successful. She hasn't given birth yet, or has. I can't even remember at this point, but we're really, really excited and happy for her. And she feels very strongly like it was this immune support that played a role. And she said to me, when we're ready to try for baby number 2, I'm going to advocate for immune support while trying naturally. I don't like using that word, while trying unmedicated or not doing a transfer, so that we can just, she's like, I'm curious, like if we were doing this to support my body post implantation in an unmedicated cycle, would it have worked? Or did we need to do an FET? And I was like, we'll never know, right? We'll never know. And that's kind of part of the hard part is we don't know for sure. But I wanted to just bring this to light for some of you who maybe haven't been screened or asked about asthma or allergies, because it can be potentially playing a role. And so there is this connection between the two. And there's a study done that was published in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology that looked at women who have asthma while they're going through the fertility journey and prior, like being diagnosed prior to trying to conceive, and how that is associated with miscarriage and recurrent pregnancy loss. They looked at 1.3 million women. So this was not a small study. Now, this was not a randomized controlled trial. They weren't trying to control it. They were just trying to see, is there a connection? And so to look at over 1 million women is astonishing. And they did find that women with asthma had higher odds of pregnancy, specifically women with what they deemed early onset asthma. And they didn't make it very clear in the study what early onset actually was, which is annoying. But I'm viewing early onset as like they were diagnosed as children, not as adults. And they found that women with early onset asthma had a 47% increase of experiencing 3 or more miscarriages compared to non-asthmatic women. That's that recurrent pregnancy loss. Almost 50% higher risk. That's massive, right? That's not small. Then they also found that uncontrolled asthma, which makes sense, right? If it's uncontrolled, if we're not using, finding our triggers, decreasing our inflammation, we're going to have more inflammation if it's uncontrolled. We're going to have more immune modulation if it's uncontrolled. So they define that as using over 400 doses of a short-acting beta-2 agonist, so a puffer, but not the daily puffer, the rescue puffer. If you needed more than 400 doses of that in a year, so that's more than a puff a day, right? The 365 days in a year. So more than a puff a day, 60% higher risk of recurrent pregnancy loss, of 3 or more miscarriages, 60%. So that's only, it's only 13% higher than like the controlled, but it's still higher. So there's some benefit, obviously, to trying to control your asthma. So the biggest things we learned from this study is that, yes, there is a connection, and that treatment is important and managing your asthma is important. And this is a total sidebar and personal story, but my brother is living with us right now. Obviously, he's not trying to get pregnant, but he has really bad asthma. He has had his whole life. They went through the gamut of allergy testing. He's very allergic to cats and dogs and all the things. He's had pets forever, and he just, lives with his asthma. And sometimes I just like can hear him coughing and coughing and coughing. And in my head, I'm like, oh my goodness, his asthma is like so uncontrolled. And we have a cat. So it's probably a part of the problem is he's allergic to our cat. But it's one of those things that I'm just like, oh, I wish we could, figure out maybe a little bit more in terms of where the trigger's coming from to help reduce. But he's 22. He's not taking care of himself. It is what it is. So, my hope is that if you are in this camp, you're now going to take it a little bit more seriously, right? Of like, okay, these are my triggers. These are things I need to think about. So, why does this matter? So we know if you have asthma, there's a higher risk of miscarriage, specifically recurrent miscarriage. So, 3 or more miscarriages. But why? One of the reasons that is being slightly dug into, we still need more research. So, yes, I want to identify that the research here is not awesome and we don't have an abundance of it. But one of the pieces being the increase in IgE and finding that women with recurrent pregnancy loss and the higher IgE can be linked to recurrent pregnancy loss. The study says it doesn't find a direct causal relationship, which it can't. And the reason for that mostly being it's hard to look at these things in a vacuum, right? When we want to do studies to learn, is this the reason? We want there to be no other factors. And in the fertility world, that's very challenging. We can't eliminate the male factor piece of things. There's a lot of aspects that we can't control for. And so it does make it more challenging to know for sure, but it is suggested that elevated IgE might be linked to increased risk of pregnancy loss when you have asthma or when you have any allergic reaction. IgE is elevated in the body. What is IgE? It is an antibody that your immune system makes. So your body makes different antibodies to fight off germs and viruses and bacteria and things. We're always getting bombarded with stuff that shouldn't be in our body, and our immune system has soldiers that go out and take care of business. IgE is one of those soldiers that is called upon in your body when you are being quote unquote attacked by things like pollen, dust mites, certain foods, our allergens. It's our allergen antibody. So when we see it elevated, we know there's an allergic response happening and we need to figure out where that allergic response is coming from. So if you're someone who gets like typical seasonal allergies, sneezy, itchy eyes, those are things that can be linked to higher IgE levels. If you get hives or chronic urticaria, even if you have like anaphylactic reactions, you could still have like just a general underlying elevated IgE. Asthma, things that are allergic, that's what we're looking for. And even if you're not, so let's say you get hives when you eat gluten, for example. I wanted to say lettuce, but like who's allergic to lettuce? Not many people, I don't think, but you never know. You just never know. So let's say you break out into hives when you eat gluten. That's your signal, right? That you're forming an allergic reaction, those symptoms, but maybe also you're getting gut symptoms. It could be actually, I'm going to take that back because I'm like deep in the celiac research right now, and a story on another day why I'm doing that. But if you have a gluten sensitivity, I don't think your IgE would be elevated. But I don't know. And I'm going to research that because I'm not sure, because it's not technically an allergy, it's a sensitivity. So let's say you are allergic to peanuts, okay? And maybe it's not the type of peanut allergy where you're like, gonna die without your EpiPen, but you get like that mouth swelling, those types of things, that your IgE is facilitating that response. And when that's high, we now know from the previous studies is that that is potentially linked to recurrent miscarriage. And it's also bringing in this topic of how the immune system and inflammation, because remember, uncontrolled asthma is worse, which means the inflammatory part is also likely a culprit, is linked to infertility. Your immune system plays such a huge role in so many things, and yet we never talk about it. It's not brought up. It's not a big factor when we're doing IUI or IVF, but it really is likely a culprit for, I would argue, over half of people with unexplained infertility and likely more than half of people with recurrent pregnancy loss. We need to be looking for these things, and these are such easy little hidden clues. Like running an IgE blood test is super cheap. It's super cheap. We just ran this with a client. She's had a couple miscarriages. We ran it. It came back really elevated. And I said, do you have allergies? And she's like, yep, I'm allergic to my dog. And I love my dog. And I was like, I hear you. I really do. And she said, I guess the best way to reduce this is to probably not live in the exposure anymore. And I said, unfortunately, yes. That is the best way. Because what do we do when we have an allergic response? We typically take an antihistamine, right? But an antihistamine is basically just treating the symptoms. So when you are having an allergic reaction, IgE is that antibody your body produces when it detects that allergens are in your system. It binds to certain cells in your body, and those cells release histamine. Histamine is what causes the symptoms, the itchiness, the sneezies, the hives, those types of things. The antihistamines block that histamine response. So they're not necessarily going to impact the levels of IgE. They're just going to impact the chemical messengers that the IgE is enforcing to be released so that you don't get any symptoms. But lowering your histamine isn't necessarily going to lower your IgE. Why? Because the allergen's still there, and that's what's triggering the IgE. So that being said, there are clinics that are using like the CPP protocol, Claritin, Pepcid, and prednisone as their immune protocol. And I'm not saying that doesn't potentially work. I have seen adding Claritin and Pepcid to protocols help clients before. I don't think it necessarily is helping from like an IgE standpoint, but these clients potentially just have a lot of histamine in their bodies. Histamine can then have a trickle down effect to more inflammation, and removing the histamine lowers the inflammation. I do think there's potential there for some sort of support, but likely not actually addressing the root cause, right? It's more symptomatic, but has the potential, I would say, for women who are more having a histamine issue versus like an allergen issue, if that makes sense. So what we really need to think about here is if you have, let's take it back to the asthma, right? If you have asthma, if you have allergies, this is your body's way of showing you that you have an overactive immune system. Your immune system is always going to try to keep you safe and healthy. And anything that is in the body that the immune system thinks this should not be here, this is foreign, this is not a part of you, it's going to attack. An embryo is only 50% your genetic material. This is the issue. It's very normal for your immune system to say, that should not be here, that's not me, and attack. And when it's overactive, it can't turn that response off. Naturally, when we get pregnant, when implantation happens and beta HCG is being produced, the body's immune system does a bit of a shuffle and it turns down that autoimmune aspect, that allergy aspect. It actually turns that down so that it doesn't attack the embryo. But if you can't do that, if your body struggles with that Th1, Th2 switch, this lies the issue. Implantation might happen, but your body may not be able to sustain that pregnancy. So this is just something for all of you with unexplained or recurrent miscarriage. If you haven't been screened properly for immune anything, this is something really, really easy, honestly. Like I said, it's a cheap blood test to look at IgE. Yes, the research is, not robust. There's not a direct correlation between, yes, if your IgE is high, you are absolutely going to have a miscarriage. But if you've had miscarriages and your IgE is high, I think it's pretty safe to say that that's something that actually needs to be addressed, right? So the best way to help lower your IgE is always going to be to identify your triggers. What are the allergens, right? If you know what they are, how can we reduce our exposure to the best of our ability? If it's dust, air purifiers, right? Like vacuuming all the time, getting your ducts cleaned, changing out that little furnace filter thing more frequently. Like, how can we just do whatever we can to try to reduce your exposure? If this is also where maybe like the mold conversation comes into play, and we don't bring that in all that often, right? Like that is a big box to take the lid off of. But if you know like that you're allergic to mold and you live in an old house and there's exposure, this is something that we maybe would want to consider. This is also where talking about your gut comes into play. 70% of your immune system lives in your gut. Your gut health is very important when we're talking about the immune system. And if your gut is inflamed, if you have those gaps between your colon cells, so leaky gut, if you're reacting to everything, you're just going to constantly be making inappropriate immune reactions to a wide variety of foods. So if you have a lot of gut symptoms, or you get a lot of gas and bloating, diarrhea, constipation, these are things you might want to start taking a deeper dive look at and addressing. Looking at, like I said, antihistamine lowering isn't necessarily the root cause treatment. Could it help? Potentially. Quercetin, vitamin C, making sure you've got adequate vitamin D, and doing proper testing, those types of things could be helpful. And then stress is probably one of the last ones. If your body is in constant state of fight or flight and sympathetic overdrive, your immune system is also going to just take a really big hit to that. And it can worsen those reactions. It can worsen allergies if you are stressed. I actually think, because I'm not going to lie, I'm very stressed right now. There's a lot going on in our personal lives. And I think my body is, at this point, is just tired, right? I think I'm just tired. And I'm definitely dealing with some seasonal allergies and some skin rashes that I've never had before, ever. And for me, I'm like, yes, there's something going on that's like probably creating some histamine in my body and yada, yada, yada. But the root of that is likely stress. And that's what I'm going to work on. I woke up this morning and was like, I'm turning a new leaf. As I also was like, I have to go work, right? So it's about for me, it's about trying to find that balance of regulating my nervous system, working on my nervous system, reducing my stress, making sure I'm getting enough sleep, but still doing the things that I love, and podcasting and supporting my clients. Those are things that do fill my cup. But my body's trying to tell me something right now. And if I'm not listening, it's only going to get worse, unfortunately. So stress and gut, those are the things I'm working on right now. And once I'm actually through the hump of it, I might record an episode and give you guys like the dirty deets on all the things I've been doing to help support my body, because I think maybe that might be interesting for you. But those are kind of the tools and strategies we would want to employ with our FCM clients. These are also all things that we talk about with everybody, right? Reducing your stress, working on your gut, making sure we're reducing triggers of anything that could be potentially impacting things. Your environment is such an important piece for you to be considering. So if this conversation is helpful for you, bring this information back to your care team. If you don't currently have a care team, come and join us inside Fertility Confidence Method. We'd love to support you. But these are things that if you're like, no one's ever asked me that, or I think this might be a part of my story, it's so simple to just do some digging, some checking, and then make some changes in your life. The last thing I will mention is that there is one medication. It's called, I'm going to butcher this, omalizumab. that's not how you say it, but it's the only one. And there is one paper I have found using this. Oh, was it a fertility paper? Was it an asthma paper? Oh my goodness. Now I can't even remember. So I shouldn't even be talking about it because I don't have it up on my screen, but where it does help to reduce IgE. So there is potential to explore this type of treatment. But I think regardless, looking at your exposures, working on your gut, working on your stress, like that is an absolute must, no brainer. And if we can avoid using any sort of unnecessary medication, the better. But knowing that there may be something there that can support you is always really important. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. If you know someone who is struggling with fertility or miscarriage, and this may be a factor for them, please share this episode with them. Rate and review and subscribe to the podcast. That's what helps show Apple and Spotify and all the things that this is good information to help, so that when other couples are looking for fertility advice, that the Fertility Confidence podcast comes up in their algorithm. And I hopefully will see you in boot camp. Like I said, if you're not signed up for boot camp, come hang out with me 5 whole days. We get to have so much fun together, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I love running boot camp this time of year because we're all kind of coming out of that winter fog at this point, which is always nice. So come hang out with me in boot camp. The link's in the show notes. So hopefully I'll see you guys on Monday, but if not, I will check you in the next episode. Take care.